It all started one crisp October evening, just days before Halloween. The air was thick with that eerie stillness that only comes before something terrible. I was scrolling through old photos on my phone. Nostalgia, or maybe the quiet loneliness, had drawn me into memories I thought I had long buried. As I swiped through images of my younger self, a photo appeared that I didn't recognize. In the picture, I was sitting on my childhood bed, staring into the camera. I hadn't seen this image before. I hadn't been in that room for over a decade. But the strangest part? I was not alone. Behind me, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was the shadowy outline of a figure. A man, tall and gaunt, his eyes dark hollow, staring directly at the camera. My heart leapt to my throat. That man? He looked familiar, like someone I once knew but couldn't place. For the next few nights, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every time I turned around, I'd catch a fleeting shadow out of the corner of my eye, just barely outside my vision. The sense of unease grew, and soon sleep became impossible. I started hearing soft whispers at night, like a faint voice just behind my ear, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. On Halloween night, I decided to confront the past. I had grown up in a small town, in a house my family had left suddenly when I was a teenager. I never understood why. That night, I drove back to the old house, abandoned now, its windows dark and lifeless, just like the memories I had tried to suppress. Standing in front of it, I felt a sickening sense of déjà vu. I hadn't come back here after we left, and yet every step toward the front door felt like I had walked it 1,000 times. I pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, as if announcing my arrival to whatever still lingered inside. Inside, the house was coated in dust, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling like the ghosts of memories. I walked to my old bedroom, heart pounding. There, in the middle of the room, was something I hadn't expected: my childhood bed. Just as it had been left, untouched by time. And on the floor beside it lay a single, crumpled photograph. It was the same photo from my phone, but this time it was clearer. The man standing behind me had a face. His sunken eyes, thin lips, and pale skin made me feel cold. My stomach churned as a long-buried memory began to surface, one I had fought to forget for years. The man was Lucas Blackwood, a name whispered in my nightmares. He had been my neighbor, someone I thought I trusted. I remembered now. He had disappeared one night when I was younger, around Halloween. But what I hadn't remembered was the chilling truth. The truth my mind had forced into darkness to protect me. Lucas Blackwood had been obsessed with me. He had followed me, watched me for months. And on the night before Halloween, when I was 13, I had found him standing at the foot of my bed. He whispered terrible things in the dark, and I could feel his cold breath on my face. My parents found out somehow. The next morning, we left everything behind and never looked back. But Lucas, he never left. He had become something else, something no longer bound by the rules of the living. As I stood in my old room, staring at the photo, a low voice echoed from behind me. "You remember me now, don't you?" It was Lucas' voice, the same voice from that night so many years ago. Slowly I turned around. There he stood, tall, gaunt, and very real. His eyes were empty pits of darkness, his skin hanging loosely on his skeletal frame. "I've been waiting for you," he rasped, stepping closer. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move, as if they were glued to the floor. He stretched out a hand, his fingers thin and long, reaching for me the same way he had all those years ago. Suddenly, I was no longer in the house. I was back in my room, the room where the photo was taken. The bed, the shadows, and the smell of decay filled the air. The scene replayed, the same haunting voice echoing as I relived the terror of that night. Every moment dragged on like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But this time there was no one to save me. As Lucas' hands gripped my shoulders, pulling me into the darkness, I screamed. I felt cold, so cold, and then everything went black. I woke up the next morning back in my own bed. The sun streamed through the windows, and for a moment, I thought it had all been a terrible dream. But when I reached for my phone, the screen lit up with the same photograph, only now. Lucas was standing right beside me. If this story gave you chills and you're ready for more, don't wait. Subscribe now to get my next terrifying tale straight to your inbox. Like and share if you dare, and let's dive deeper into the darkness together. Have your own horror story? Leave a comment. I want to hear it.